Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155 from UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcast. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championships, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championships, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. And I'm your host, Tate. And today we got a special episode where we are actually previewing UFC 202. Now, 202, which features Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz, is one of the most anticipated rematches I can remember in a long time in the UFC. And there's been a lot of hype behind this fight. So today we're gonna touch on the match between Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor. We're also gonna talk about some of the undercard fights because there's some pretty good fights on this card. They may not have the big names that you may be accustomed to, but there's some really interesting fights on here. So we're gonna also talk about the co-main event, which is Anthony Rumble Johnson versus Glover Teixeira, which this fight is one of those fights that will have a lot of fireworks. You're going to also have two action-packed guys where you got Rick Story versus Donald Cerrone. And then we also have one of the true up-and-coming stars, which will be Cody Garbrandt, who's going to be fighting on the prelims. So you're going to have some really interesting fights. We're going to go through and kind of break things down. I know there's been all kind of fireworks this week, especially at the press conference where a water fight kind of broke out here. They were first off, Conor McGregor kind of showed up about 20 minutes late, so I think that kind of really got under Nate Diaz's skin a little bit. But as they were asking asking questions to Nate, and then Conor started answering questions. Nate just got up, and he started leaving. Then there was words passed back and forth. Next thing you know, Nate throws a bottle at Conor. Conor starts throwing multiple bottles at Nate Diaz and his crew. It breaks out into a big old water, they were throwing water bottles back and forth, which then at that point Dana kind of ended the press conference. So there's been a lot of that. There's been some fallout. Some people are talking about lawsuits and things like that. So this fight is just already have started out being full of drama. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the main event, and I'm also going to give you my predictions on these fights as well. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back with the fights.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, we're back. And we're going to first touch on that big main event, which everyone's kind of looking forward to. And all week I've been getting, who are you taking, Tate? Who are you taking in this fight? Well, I'll get to that in just a second. First, we're going to talk about that first fight, in which Conor McGregor actually lost in the second round with a rear naked choke. And, I went back and I kind of looked at this fight, and I was trying to see kind of what happened in here. And there's a couple of stories in this fight, in the first fight, that I think might have been missed. The first thing I'd like to say is, when you start watching this fight, in the first round, as far as sheer striking ability, Conor McGregor was actually the far superior, actually stand-up fighter. He was actually tagging Nate Diaz pretty much at will. He was tagging him. He cut him. He was bleeding, but he was hammering him with shots. And the first story, actually the second story, because the first story is the fact that Conor had a very easy time hitting Nate Diaz. So that's one of the keys to the game is in this second match, in a rematch. Will that still be the same case? Will Conor be able to land at will on Nate Diaz? Because if he can, that could end up being a big problem for Nate Diaz. The other thing that came out of this fight when I went back and looked at it is the fact that Conor was nailing Nate Diaz with lots and lots of shots, but Nate was absorbing them all. Every single one of them, shots that knocked out Jose Aldo and knocked out so many other people, were just normal shots. And that's the one thing that Conor McGregor was not prepared for, I don't think. And it's one of the big mistakes why I think a lot of fighters, one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of fighters make, and that is they clean out their division and they decide they want to move up a weight class. But the one thing that traditionally doesn't come with you, and if it does come with you, it takes time to come with you, and that is your power. You lose a little speed and you lose a little power when you go up in weight. And that was one of the biggest keys to the first fight. Conor could not hurt Nate enough. He couldn't put Nate away. And because he was hitting him with so many shots, it came to the third key to this fight, which is Conor, as he kept on firing and kept on firing, you could tell he was getting gassed. And one of the things about the Diazes, and that's both of them, is that they're very, as the fight goes on, they get stronger. Their cardio is always on point, even at the higher weights. So at the end of the first round, McGregor, who had won that first round pretty easily, but McGregor had started to slow down, and he was starting to get gassed. So the start of the second round, right out the gate, Nate started closing that gap, which is another factor. Can Nate in this next fight close the gap between him and McGregor? Because McGregor, even though McGregor's a small man, McGregor has one of the longest reaches of any fighter in the UFC, and that's the key. That's the key that many fighters overlook. Is guys who you might have fought that's the same size as a Conor McGregor, you're outside of their reach in a safe zone, but you're right in striking zone with Conor McGregor. And so one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to close that gap. And once McGregor started in the second round of the first fight, as McGregor got tired and started slowing down, Nate was able to close that gap and start tagging Conor McGregor. With that's being gassed and starting to get tagged actually caused Conor McGregor to make a huge mistake. And this is one of the biggest keys to the first fight and a key to the second fight is this. Nate Diaz has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He knows his way around on the ground. Most people just think about the Diaz brothers as someone who you could, they like to strike, but they're very comfortable on the mat. And the one thing that Conor McGregor is not is comfortable on the mat. You're talking about a black belt versus an average ground fighter. And it really showed. It really, really showed. So when I was going through and I was breaking down that first fight again, one of the things that really showed the big difference between a top-notch black belt and someone who's a novice. And McGregor didn't make a lot of mistakes. It was just that Diaz knew how to exploit those mistakes. And, as the fight was going on in the second round, McGregor is getting gas, and the first thing he does is he tries to shoot for a double leg. So he shoots for a double leg takedown, which and pretty much what he's trying to do is he's hoping to take a double leg, get on top of Diaz, and slow him down while catching his own breath, which is a smart move in most cases. But when you're dealing with someone who has a very high IQ when it comes to ground fighting, you're talking about a Brazilian black belt. So the first thing that happened is when he shot for the double leg, Nate actually blocked that and kind of stretched McGregor out. McGregor did the smart thing in this exchange, which was to initially, what you normally do in this situation when it gets blocked and he was kind of stretched out, is to naturally sit down on that takedown, which then allows you to roll out of this. But the big difference in this exchange that happened between McGregor and Diaz is the fact that when he tried to sit down, Diaz instantly put that into pressure on his neck and shoulders, which made McGregor go to his next option, which is kind of to escape out the back door. And what I mean by that is McGregor pivoted his hips and turned his right knee toward Nate Diaz's right shoulder, hoping that would allow him to spin out of trouble and get back up. But Nate was really smart in the exchange. And I know some of you may not really like grappling, but I was explaining how Nate counteracted everything that McGregor did on the ground, which then ultimately ran him into the rear naked choke and ended the fight. So where McGregor actually turned his hips and pointed his knee to Diaz's right shoulder to kind of spin out of it, instead of letting him, the first thing Diaz did was he turned that move into a situation where it was putting pressure and it became a guillotine situation. So McGregor had to go out the back door where he tried to spin around. But when he tried to spin around, one of the things that Diaz did was instantly he stuck his leg out to stop the spin around. He wrapped his leg around him and then turned McGregor. And then eventually, with a couple of shots, he ended up on McGregor's back. I don't mean to go in such a long detail, but that's the kind of things that someone who has a lot of ground experience and that's his specialty kind of does. McGregor didn't do anything wrong when he was trying to escape and trying to change the situation from losing his double leg, not successfully getting that double leg takedown. It was how Nate Diaz counteracted everything he did. And so that really put him in a bad situation. And ultimately, when they're on the ground, everyone knows what happened. Eventually, through all the different moves, he ended up putting Conor McGregor in a rear naked choke, and this fight was over. Now, that's one of the situations where that shows you how this fight, the first fight, really kind of went by a few things. Conor McGregor's stamina and the fact that he lack of ground skills. So when we come back, we're going to talk about how the second fight is going to go down, and I'm going to give you my prediction. I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, and we're back. Thank you for tuning back in. And we just got done going over and kind of recapping kind of what went down in the first fight where Nate Diaz scored a second-round stoppage via rear naked choke, and how McGregor kind of turned into how he ended up getting into that situation. Well, I went back and I was watching this fight, as you know. And I was going through and I was trying to figure out, okay, so this time, what are the keys to Conor McGregor not falling into the same situation? And every single time I watch this fight, I see the exact same thing happening every single time. Maybe with a different outcome, maybe with the same outcome. Both of these guys are who they are. And I say the same keys to the first fight are going to be the same keys to the second fight, with one different caveat, and that is this. Both fighters are going to go in with a full camp this time. There's no short notice. There's no being out of shape, not used to fighting at 170. So that's going to make it so both fighters are going to have a lot more stamina. And when I look at this and I say, okay, if both fighters have a lot more stamina, they're going to be a lot more comfortable in this weight class. At this weight, how do I see things going down this time? And I go right back to those keys to this fight. The first thing, keys for Nate Diaz, and that is closing the distance, scoring the takedowns on McGregor. And then taking McGregor to deep water, which is exactly kind of the same game plan he had for the first fight. For Conor McGregor, it's going to be pretty much the same as the first fight, which is he's going to have to use his reach, his skills. He's going to need to use the kick a heck of a lot more, because he needs to keep that distance. So he's going to have to keep a nice distance between those two. He's going to, and it's a must. It's a necessity of life for McGregor. He's going to have to stop the takedown. If it goes to the takedown, the minute this goes to takedown, this fight's over. And so he's going to have to stop Diaz from taking him down. So if McGregor's able to keep the distance, stop the takedowns, and then also pace himself. Because the biggest reason why he lost that first fight is strictly he didn't have the gas in the tank. He went in there, really he only had one round worth of gas in his tank. This fight, now with a full camp, he's going to have a lot more stamina, and that's going to help him out. Now, we go to my predictions on how things go. And I've been going back and forth. How would Diaz win this fight? How do I see Diaz winning the fight first? I see Diaz pretty much doing what he did the first time, which is weathering the storm. And McGregor's going to bring the storm. So he's going to have to weather the storm, wait till McGregor slows down, and then close the gap, and then take him to the ground and finish him off. Now, And so it's that same kind of situation. Now the second thing is, how can McGregor win? McGregor is going to be a different fight this time. Same fight but different. Instead of McGregor running out of gas the first round, I think McGregor's going to have a solid 2.5 rounds of gas. That means, can McGregor dish out enough damage without getting taken down? But can he dish out enough damage in 2 or 3 rounds to finish Nate Diaz off? That's the key to this whole entire fight, because it's already proven that he can tap and he can hit Nate Diaz. And so when I look at this, my key to this fight is McGregor's going. I would like to see McGregor start out strong and bring it to him and make sure that he doesn't get taken down. If he's able to do that and keep that pace going without running out of gas, I actually have, and this is a tough one for me to say, Conor McGregor winning by a 3rd round knockout. But if this fight gets past the third round, I think Nate Diaz is going to wear him out. I think he'll take him to the ground. I think he'll beat him up, and I think he'll finish him off. So I think really Conor McGregor has 3 solid rounds in him that he can do his damage, and if he's able to finish him off in that first 3 rounds, he will win. If not, that whole fight changes. So that gives you, I just wanted to give you my take on how I kind of project and see things going. I would love to, the fight is tonight, but if you want to give me your opinion on Twitter, feel free to give me your take on Twitter. Now, so for the very first fight, like I said, I got Conor McGregor winning by a 3rd round knockout. The next fight we're going to talk about are some of the undercards. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with the breakdown of the undercards. Stay tuned.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, we're back. And we just went through and kind of broke down the main event for UFC 202, which is Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor. And I'm actually taking Conor McGregor with a 3rd round knockout. Now we're going to touch on some of the other fights that are going to be on this card. And the one fight that I'm really looking forward to, I don't see this fight lasting very long. You have 2 of the hardest hitting guys in the entire UFC, maybe in all of mixed martial arts. You have Anthony Rumble Johnson versus Glover Teixeira. Now, these 2 guys they're such powerhouses. Major powerhouses. Both of these guys are going to like the press. So this is going to be a very interesting fight where they're not going to hide from each other. They're going to come after each other. So the key to this fight to me is this. It's Rumble Johnson's speed. Rumble Johnson, both of these guys hit about the same. They'll knock your block off. So, how do I see who's going to win this fight? I got Rumble Johnson winning by a 2nd round knockout, maybe even a 1st round knockout, but it's strictly because of the fact that there's a major speed difference between the 2 guys. So I have Anthony Rumble Johnson winning and going on because the winner of this is supposed to get Daniel Cormier. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but That's what's been said. So I got Anthony Johnson winning the co-main event by a second round TKO. Or KO, let's just say. The next fight before that, is Rick Story versus Donald Cerrone. Now, this is a fight that will be interesting. With Donald Cerrone moving up to the welterweight division, he has been on he's always been a top fighter, but since he's moved up in weight, he's done a couple things. He's moved up in weight, and then the other thing is that he's really working himself up before the fight. He's been traditionally a very, very slow starter, and that really cost him against RDA. But now he's kind of figured this out where he's getting a good workout in. So he's really trying to get, he kind of gets his first round out of the way in the locker room, which is something that a lot of boxers will do. So he gets a big workout in right before he comes to the fight. And then he gets to the ring, and now he's ready to go. So he kind of works that slow starting out of him. And since then, that has been a fantastic move on his part because he's been almost unstoppable. And Rick Story's more of a wrestler. I got Donald Cerrone just beating up on him. I got Donald Cerrone, I got him winning by a third-round stoppage. Cerrone's just too skilled and just too much. So I got this by another stoppage here. So as I recap who I've taken so far, I got Conor McGregor with a third round knockout. I got Anthony Rumble Johnson with a second round knockout, and then I have Donald Cerrone with a third round knockout. Another fight on this card that I think everyone should watch. This is on the prelims on Fox. There's a guy on this card that everyone needs to get to know. And I used to say the same thing about Wonder Boy as well. That there's two guys that I think are just the up and coming future or the up and coming stars of the mixed martial arts world and the UFC. That's Donald Cerrone, and then that's Cody Garbrandt. Now Cody has he's I believe he's 9-0, and Cody has all the skills. Cody is the first guy that I've seen in a long time that I say, man, I want to see him against Dominic Cruz, because Dominic Cruz is a very tough puzzle to figure out. He has a very unique way of moving in the ring, but Cody is that guy that he's a well-rounded guy. He can close the gap. He's the guy that can actually tap and touch Dominic Cruz. And so I'm really excited about watching him fight again. I went back and I watched a number of his fights, and the guy has it all. He is a complete fighter. He has that look that the UFC wants. So they're going to push him along because he's a sharp guy in the ring and out of the ring. And so I could see if he wins this one and another one, it's going to be Dominic Cruz versus Cody. And so I'm really looking forward to this fight. So this is one of those fights that I really think everyone should really think about checking out, because it is definitely one of the up-and-coming stars. Now, that concludes, and by the way, I have Cody winning this fight with ease. Second round stoppage against Mizugaki. But yeah, and I'd be shocked if Mizugaki was able to pull off an upset. But yeah, I have Cody winning this and gearing up for one more fight, and then possibly Dominic Cruz. So this card has been, this has been the whole UFC 202. You know, everyone's really excited about it, but one of the things I was kind of overall surprised about is the fact that the UFC this morning had to cut the ticket price for 202 to finish selling it out. This fight was not an outright sellout, where I thought this fight would be sold out by last week, but it wasn't. So I don't know why that would be. Is it because this time because of how things kind of went down with 200, and a lot of people who would have went to this one ended up going to 200, and then McGregor didn't make it? But this one was not. This is not the fight where McGregor actually brought in a huge ticket price. And so, being that, going back to the McGregor situation, being that this fight didn't sell out the way everyone suspected and wanted it to sell out, and if McGregor loses, I mean, this fight is so important because this could really affect, the overall future of Conor McGregor, as far as, especially for demanding huge dollars. If he comes off of 2 losses, and then UFC has to spin it where you have a 2-loss champion going back down to fight and defend his title, I think Conor McGregor is going to get a huge, monstrous pay cut. So I'm curious to see how this fight breaks down. Another bit of UFC news before we wrap things up is the fact that this week Jon Bones Jones made an announcement that he expects to be back in the ring very soon, and that was a big surprise. And I think a lot of people were surprised by that. But the even bigger surprise was when Dana White actually kind of agreed that he's expecting Jon Bones Jones to be back in the ring again sooner than later, and that he didn't test positive for what everyone thought he had tested positive for. If it comes out that he didn't test positive, or that he had a tainted supplement or something like that where he gets a reduce, I think the entire media world owes that guy an apology, because everyone has beat him up and called him a cheater and everything under the sun. And I know he's gone through some tough times, but you go through, and it's a big story when someone tests positive. But when it comes out and he didn't, and it's not quite as bad as everyone think it's going to be, and it turns out that he didn't cheat, I think it should be just as big of a deal and just as big a story that, he was clean. And I really hope that a lot of the media makes a big point of this. This whole thing, I think, will wash out within the next week or two, where I could see him, maybe if it's a tainted supplement, maybe getting suspended for 2 or 3 months. There's even talk that with the way things are going down, that he may even be available for UFC to New York. If that's the case, I'd be happy to see him and Cormier go at it, but I'm definitely very curious about seeing how that goes down. With that concludes my take on UFC 202, the preview show. I'm looking forward to seeing all the prelims tonight, and I'm definitely looking forward to this main event card. With that, I'm out, and I'll see you at the fights.